Welcome to the Underground.
Turn me up, bitch!
My Little Underground with Peter A.
When I did college radio, I did a show 10 a.m. to 12, and I'd be the only one in the entire building. So when I had a guest come in, I would bring Mike with me, Smiley, and I'll have him run downstairs and let the people in. But there were times I hated that shit. There were times where he would bring people in, and then while I'm doing a live mic break, people would start chattering underneath that press. They don't understand that, like, I'm live on the air. So it was, I don't even want to, anxiety from talking about stuff like that. Anyway, it's level 44, My Little Underground. I'm Peter A, celebrating 2 years of this great podcast known as My Little Underground. And don't forget to subscribe, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get podcasts. I'm there. I'm on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram. It's Peter_A. You can follow the show as well at MLU Pod, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well. Now, usually on this here show, I bring people from the outside to come down here to the underground. But I want to kick off 2020 in a special way by bringing people from my inside to your outside, if that makes any sense. I'm talking about the man behind the boards who engineers most of my podcasts when I'm not doing it in my kitchen. My man, Mike Gevasa, is right here, right in front of me. What's up, Mike?
Hey, what's going on?
So, Mike is a producer, engineer, runs this gorgeous studio, Shelter Island Sound. Well, this portion of Shelter Island Sound.
Yes.
And you interned here, right?
Correct.
You have a lot of history here. So, you were in college when you started interning here, or what?
No,
What's the story?
It was, I went to Hofstra.
Yes.
And I went there for audio radio, and it was really kind of, geared more towards radio, and I really wanted to be in the studio. So I kind of just dropped out of there, and my dad found this program called the Recording Connection, where they basically they hook you up with an internship at a studio, and the studio they sent me to was Shelter Island Sound here, under Steve Adabo, who is a absolute master, and he was my mentor. I was the apprentice. So that was back in 2008, and pretty much, yeah, I just kind of worked my way up the ranks, proved myself, and I took everything I was learning from him and kind of applied it to my own setup, and that became Continental Recording Studio, which is the first place I recorded you at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
LIC.
Yeah. And so then basically last year, 2019, I made the move back here when this room became available to Shelter Island Sound, and Steve's still here, and I'm still, kind of doing my thing, but now I'm just in the center of Manhattan as opposed to Long Island City. A beautiful facility with some great engineers.
Yeah. So you came in as an intern from Shelter Island did you want to learn from a musician standpoint, because you're also a punk, Semi Automatix, which we'll talk about, music from a musician standpoint, or an engineer standpoint, or from a music business point of view, or an amalgamation of all three?
Well, it's a good question. It actually all ties in, because really my love of recording started with Semi Automatix, which was my high school punk band. So we started that back in 2002, I believe. It went through a few different name changes, but basically, we formed, we rehearsed, we wrote songs, we played shows, and then when it came time to record, I kind of just gravitated towards being the guy that, wanted to do the recording. And when we first recorded, we just kind of did it with a few mics through like a Tascam Porta Studio at our friend Greg's house, who now he's in the band. He actually joined the band later in high school, and then we kind of fell off, and then when we reformed, he's back with us again. But we recorded that music, with limited resources, and with basically just crappy mics, a few crappy mics, and some, a Tascam Porta Studio. And that was like, from that point on, I just fell in love with it. And then actually so I did that for a while, and then we went into a studio at this guy's place on Long Island. I was like at his house, but it was like more of a proper studio. It had like control room, live room kind of setup. And that was when I really was like, this is what I want to do with my life. And I was like probably about at that point, like 15, 16. So, you know, I always knew I wanted to do that. And then when it got time to go to college, it was like, that was what, '04. And they really didn't have as much in the recording field as they do now. I mean, they have a good recording program at Nassau Community. They've had that for a while. They've had SAE for a while. But the resources weren't like they are now. It's like if you were trying to go to like a university or a college, they were very limited with the recording classes. So now it's much more of an accessible degree. But I digress. So, yeah, what was the question again?
Well, you know, basically, like, what kind of brought you in here?
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I essentially did want to learn the technical aspect of it because I wanted to record. I fell in love with the art.
Yeah, because you're in a band and you're like, okay, how do I make this work to make my band work?
Well, kind of, but by the point I got here, that was like why I originally fell in love with recording and why I started doing it. But when I got to Shelter Island Sound, by that point, the band wasn't together anymore. So it was more to learn how to do this as a career because it's like I just knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. So, yeah, that was the goal, was to learn the technical aspects, and Steve taught me well.
What was some of the most important lessons that you've learned from the studio? Like, was it for you to, let me get a job in recording, let me get a job in live sound, let me mix people's sessions, or let me run my studio? Which way were you trying to go?
I wanted to own a studio. I wanted to run a studio, and that kind of was my goal, to learn how to do that. And I really did learn that from Steve because I took everything that he was teaching me and just applied it to my own situation. And it happened organically because around 2008, we also moved out to Brooklyn. Me and my brother moved in with our friend Nick and our friend Doug, and we were living out on Manhattan Ave in Greenpoint, and we needed a rehearsal space. So we found this rehearsal space, and it was just like, you know, it was on Greenpoint Ave, right by the water over there, right by the East River, and there was a recording studio, and they had rehearsal rooms, and basically they were just like, they would stick the bands in the rehearsal rooms. You would pay a few $100 a month, and then there'd be 2 other bands that they put in there, and so I had amassed a lot of recording equipment by this point. Not a lot, but, you know, enough to... I moved that in, and I started recording our stuff in the rehearsal space. And now other bands that were renting with us started to hear what we were doing, like what I was doing with the recording and with our music, and they asked me to record them. And that's kind of how it snowballed. After that, I just kept applying everything. Like, I'd be coming in to Shelter Island Sound, like, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, assistant engineering with Steve, or like if another engineer would come in, like Nick Sansano came in a few times, Bob Powers on this floor, Mark Dearnley came in. I think I'm saying that right. He did AC/DC, Highway to Hell. So like I'd be assisting guys like that, learning all these tricks and techniques and how they do it, and kind of just applying that. And at the same time, I was starting to build clients, and that's pretty much... So it snowballed into the situation I wanted it to be in. And yeah, Continental was a great, we did a great thing there, I felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So your clientele is building up, and at this point, you want to start your own space. Right?
Yeah.
Do you have a space yet at this point?
We were just in that rehearsal spot, and basically we asked the studio. They had their main studio was like upstairs in that building, and then the rehearsal spaces were like ground floor. And so there were 2 right next to each other. They were nice. They had like wood floor, concrete walls. There was like drywall between them. And we asked them if they could put a window between them and we could rent it as a control room, live room. And they asked for like kind of an outrageous, well, it's like what I thought was an outrageous price at the time. But I think looking back on it, it was probably pretty reasonable. But we were paying like, $200, $300 rehearsal space. And then they wanted like, I don't know how much for the 2 complete rooms. And so we were like, I knew I wanted a control room live room, so I was like, let's find another situation. And then there's a long saga as to how we ended up. We ended up in Long Island City in a this Empire rehearsal studio was called, and we had them build us a little control room live room, and they did it, and we ended up there for a couple of years, and then the spot in Long Island City that you went to, that really became Continental. That happened that was like 2011 or 12 by the time that happened. 2011, I think. And yeah, so basically it kind of all, moved towards that direction.
So, who's coming in to Continental? Who are you recording
At that time?
At this point, yeah.
At that point, by the time I guess we were at the first spot in Long Island City with the control room live room, that was like 2009, 2010 to 2011, 12, like around that area. During that time is when, it was all underground artists. It was people I would find on Craigslist. I would just go hustle, go out to shows, meet people, and pretty much then there was the band the first band we recorded in there. It was kind of like, they were called Indians, and they had like this kind of MGMT sound, and we did some pretty great stuff, and that took place in the first spot, and then it kind of like word of mouth snowballed. So I ended up recording, pretty much mostly underground rock, underground hip hop. I started to really get involved with, and so basically around that time that I was in that first Long Island City spot, I recorded a band called Highway Gimps, and so they were like part of this Brooklyn underground punk scene. And that record was great. We had a great time making it. They released it, and everyone in the scene loved it. So after that, it was just like pretty much that whole scene became like, I started recording all kinds of bands out of that scene. That included the Brooklyn What. I did their record, Hot Wine. I did Let Me Crazy's record, Eponymosity, which they released post breakup, unfortunately, but that was a great record, great band. So it started to grow into these like more notable underground like bands, and pretty much kind of stayed that way for a long time. Probably till about 2018, and I got like Mr. Wives in there, and so we did a song called Why. So that got released in 2019, and that was like on Fueled by Ramen. That was pretty much the first like big label thing that I had brought in there, and it kind of was the culmination of Continental.
Everything you did before.
Yeah.
So you really didn't have a lot of formal training in recording, right?
Well,
as far as being in here,
it all came from Steve, really, because
right.
part of the program was that they would give you formal training. I mean,
right.
There was like when I was
like
at
you didn't go
Hofstra,
to a school, you didn't go to like a conservatory or anything like that.
No.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, when I was at Hofstra, I had there was some studio classes there, but the stuff they were formally teaching you, with air quotes, was I already knew it by the time I got there, because I was reading so much prior to going to Hofstra. So like I kind of like would just walk in, and they'd be like, "All right, we're gonna show you how to set up a drum kit today," and I already know how to do it.
Yeah. So what are you reading at this point?
It was actually the textbook that we ended up using here at Shelter, in those like the lessons for the recording connection. It was called like Modern Recording Techniques, and then also my friend put me on to record what's it called, Sweetwater. Back in the day, they had this whole section, and it was like audio tips and tricks, stuff like that. And so basically, I was that was when I was like 14, 15, 16, and I pretty much read all of it, like every bit of, like, they had like a glossary of all different terms, recording terms. They had just all different techniques and tips, gear tips and everything, and I just pretty much read all of that.
So when you're recording artists, at first, what are you doing? Are you just setting up their mics? You're just recording from what Pro Tools, I'm assuming. Or,
when I first
or
started,
what?
you mean? Or?
Yeah.
Well, you're talking like in the beginning, it was like I had like my buddy had that Tascam Porta Studio.
Yeah.
We used that, and then the next thing was like once I kind of expressed to my parents that I was interested, it was like Christmas or something. What do you want? And I was like, I want something to record on. So I got like a Korg digital recorder, and that had like a little mixer on it, so you could like record multi-track. And I used that for a while, and then kind of once I got to Shelter Island Sound, they had like Pro Tools was starting to become a little bit more accessible. You know, before that, like when I first started, when I was like 15, we're talking like 2000, it's like Pro Tools was not accessible unless you were like, you know, a studio or something. You had to spend money on it. I didn't have money at that age. So.
Of course.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know when you're recording people, like my brother, for example, you're not just hitting record. You're kind of helping them produce in a way. Is that true?
It depends on the, you know, really on the job. If I'm hired as a producer, or if the artist gives me any leeway or expresses to me that they want my input, then yeah, I'll definitely help them out with that. If there's a producer in the session, you know, sitting there guiding it, and I'm just the engineer, then all I'm doing is making sure everything sounds good. If I hear an off pitch, I might bring it up to them, but I wouldn't interject, you know, because that's like a kind of don't feed the animals kind of situation. You want to just be there making it happen while the producer makes those decisions.
Right.
But yeah, it's all tied together.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
So when you're recording artists, are you learning anything from them? Or what have you learned from recording certain artists?
I've learned a lot. Yeah, it's it really, when I look back on it, you know, I kind of came into the whole thing from the punk rock background. So when I was younger, I was very into like rock and metal and punk and, you know, anything with guitars. I never really listened to much hip hop. Definitely didn't listen to much pop. And basically when I first started working with hip hop was kind of when my sound started to change, because I started to like listen and be like, well, their drums sound very like fat, and they sound very like kind of bombastic, or like, you know, some kind of like they're very vibrant. And then like I'm like listening to the drums I'm recording, and I'm like, it sounds very like stiff and thin, and it sounds like if you're closing your eyes and you're looking at a drum kit. But then if I listen to like, and like back in the day it would be like Nirvana or Alice in Chains, their drums sound like huge. So then I started taking like techniques that I was using in like hip hop mixes and stuff and applying them in, you know, rock mixes and vice versa. So you know, it kind of went the same for across the board with genres, because then I started working with different people trying to do pop music or classical music or jazz, and I started taking different techniques and different things that I would learn from those sessions and apply them to other genres, like apply like, you know, a rock technique to a jazz mix, and like it might not work, but just try it, you know. And I've just kind of, you know, I guess learned that, you know, there's kind of greatness in everybody, and there's like, you know, a kind of constant that goes through any session I do, whether it's big or small. You know, we're kind of all trying to achieve the same thing, and there's like a level of talent that is there within everybody, and I've kind of learned that from working with a very wide variety of people, because I get to see the talent in all these different people.
I mean, that's a good point, because I was listening to a podcast. It was Rick Rubin and Andre 3000. And Andre 3000 said that to make your genre better, it's good to listen to other genres. Mm-hmm. And, you know, Outkast did that, you know, almost the best. They took from totally different sounds and made their own thing. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I think that's cool that you've helped, you know, you've taken something from everything, which is interesting. So, you know, you've named some like underground bands that you've worked with. Like what hip hop acts have you worked with, from an underground level to a more, you know, mainstream level? What? Break it down.
Break it down. So there's this guy that was an early hip hop client of mine. Let's see, he stuck with me for a while. His name was Dub Lights. So we did a whole record called The Legal Way Out. So that was, I can't remember exactly what year that came out. I want to say 2010. So we did that. We did quite a few singles, and those came out great. He's worth checking out. Dub Lights, Dubblights, Dub Lights. I worked with him for a long time, and then I'm working with a guy now named Profit, Profhit, Profit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm working with him a lot lately. We have a whole record that we're working on.
You're producing, you're engineering?
Engineering, you know,
Okay.
There's definitely a lot of leeway in terms of like what I've been able to do on that record. You know, I've been able to kind of get in there and kind of play around with the beats and arrangements and stuff. He's kind of given me a lot of leeway with that, and I think the results are sounding great. Those are two that come to mind right away, and then a lot of them are, you know, guys that just come in, do a track or two for, like, you know, SoundCloud, and, you know, I've had plenty of guys like that. Let's see. At the end of last year, once I moved to Shelter, my kind of clientele started to go up a little bit. So I got the opportunity to work with Rozelle from The Roots, and Young Dirty Bastard, Wu-Tang. So
Yeah.
those have been, you know, two awesome clients to work with, and we worked on a couple tracks that I expect to come out this year. So we'll see. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, I'm glad you brought SoundCloud up, because I feel like there's a lot of artists that are taking the DIY approach to recording, and not necessarily going into studios, to kind of just recording wherever they can, or maybe, you know, when they get some money, they record, you know, out of their homes. Where do you see studio recording going in the future?
That's a
Like
great
what we're
question.
doing right now? Yeah.
Yeah, no, because it's true. I mean, the results you can get at home, and like a lot of these plugins they have out there now that are like one knob, one button, and you put it on your audio and it sounds good. Those are definitely making it a tough career to pursue. But I mean, for the most part, especially in New York City, people can't have a drum kit in their, you know, apartment. So the big room across the hall here, we could do a drum kit. We have a grand piano. I mean, Steve's got legendary gear. It's a legendary room, so that draws a lot of people in. But the general studio value of the studio, I think, when you walk into one of these places, besides like the technically, you know, great sounding rooms, it's also the expertise you get, you know, and like you're working with people. I know when I first started, like at the very beginning of my career, something that may have taken me like 6 hours back then, now I can do in, I don't know, like probably minutes, you know. It's like, so I'm able to do a lot of things very fast that, like, when you're working on at home, you're capable of getting great results, absolutely. But it's probably going to take a lot longer. And for some people, it doesn't. And those people are the people that record at home, and you don't see them in the studio. But there's definitely plenty of people out there that still require our expertise here.
I think, you know, there's a lot of benefits of going to the direct to SoundCloud approach, you know, because again, it's DIY. You can do it yourself. You can get things to people instantly. We live in that age.
Absolutely.
But from my perspective, from a podcasting perspective, I think recording in a neutral space like a studio has a layer of professionalism to it. Like if I bring somebody to my house to record, you know,
Yeah.
there's a level of intimacy there that's like, you know, I'm not ready for, because I don't know the guest that's coming
Yeah.
in. You know, I just know the work they do. But there is something to recording DIY. Like I said, you know, for me at least, if I'm recording by myself, yeah, I'm gonna set up a mic and just hit record, see what happens. There's freedom to that. You're not, you know, you don't have a set time. You know, you're not paying on the hour, but you know, when you come to a studio, again, you have that professionalism. You know, people can see, wow, you're the real deal. You're not just some dude, you know, just recording whatever, just for whatever. You know what I mean? So, you know, again, with in regards to like technology, kind of switching gears a little bit, what are some new studio technology that you're seeing taking place? Because again, back in the day in the 80s, more people were using more digital approaches to music. Is there any other kind of new age recording methods that you've seen that may take place in the future or now? Anything you've seen at conventions or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people seem to be moving towards kind of like, I guess, embracing touch screen and stuff like that. I mean, these days, that when it comes to like the advances that I've seen since I started doing it, I mean, because I was kind of born into the digital world. When I started, I didn't learn on tape except for like that Tascam cassette thing, but that's not really tape. I learned pretty much on digital, and really that has been my medium as long as I've been doing this. And when I started to now, the advances they've made to make the sound quality gap between digital and analog, it's like there's no gap at this point. Digital almost sounds better at this point. And they have like all kinds of tape saturation plugins. So you could put a tape plugin on your digital signal, and now it sounds like it was on a tape machine. So just closing that gap, because like when I started, it was a big discussion amongst engineers. Like some hated digital, some like embraced digital right away and said this is the future, and so that was a big argument for a long time. And now that argument doesn't even exist. Like no one really talks about like how much better analog is than digital. It's all kind of morphed into a hybrid system, much like what we're working on here today, with an analog console and analog gear going to a digital, where digital's like your tape machine almost. So
you would say, or would you say that, to my knowledge, a lot of people that I've talked to, a lot of audiophiles have said that FLAC is like the highest quality of digital sound. Is that true or no?
Well, that's kind of a tough question to answer, because really, like the highest quality, like what we're working on is we're working with a WAV file, and you can have a WAV file go up to like 192K, I think maybe even higher at this point. And so when you're listening on a CD, you're listening to maybe a WAV file that's 44.1K 16-bit, as opposed to we're working in 24-bit. So when you convert that 24-bit 48K WAV file to FLAC, there's no loss. Like when you convert the 24-bit 48K WAV file to a 16-bit 44.1K WAV file, there's a little bit. Actually, no, there's no loss. I can't say that. But if you go to like an MP3, then you're going to experience loss of quality. So FLAC is like full quality, lossless. So I don't know if I would say it's the best. It's pretty much the same as like a full 96K 24-bit WAV file, pretty much.
So what are the different types of lossless audio? There's
WAV, AIFF.
Yeah. iTunes uses AAC.
Yeah, but it's not lossless.
It's not lossless?
No, because they convert it from, because like the files have to be small enough for people to be able to stream it, to transmit it, like, to download it, and it's in your library instantly. So they make it a smaller file, basically. So as far as I'm aware, it's lossy. You could get the Apple Digital Masters, and that's pretty much as close as you're going to get to lossless, like on iTunes.
So if we rank streaming audio, like the way it is, Spotify Premium, Apple Music, Tidal, and lossless, AAIF, or it was AIFF, right? Mm-hmm. And FLAC, and then vinyl. Where do you rank the three?
Vinyl's gonna sound the best, because it's it's kind of, especially if it's from tape to vinyl, or when you master something and you give them a digital file for vinyl at this point, you're gonna give them the 24-bit whatever sample rate it is. You're gonna give them that. Like if it's if you worked in 96K the whole time, that was your resolution, and then this is getting so nerdy. Yeah. And then you give that the mastering guys that, and then they prepare that for distribution. They give that to the vinyl printers. they're printing it at the highest, from the highest quality. So then the streaming they have high quality streaming, which sounds pretty good. And lossless is probably better, I would say, quality than the streaming, and then down, to MP3s is like the worst thing.
Yeah. So do you think, at least in this decade, that I guess maybe the music industry controls this? Like I don't know if they control like how people consume stuff. Do you think that we're going to get music, streaming is going to evolve, or we're going to get high quality audio files that we're able to listen to on a phone?
I feel like streaming's going to evolve.
Streaming, okay.
If you get audio files high quality, I think the evolution in there is probably going to be like cloud-based, like where you can have these lossless files that are, bigger file sizes, but the internet's going to become so fast, and with 5G or whatever next Gs they come out with, it's going to make it so you can access those files in the cloud like really fast, even though they're big. Because that's the problem right now, is that the internet isn't fast enough for you to be like sitting there downloading like a full album of like 96K files, and it's going to take up a lot of space on your phone, So if they had that up in a cloud, you would probably experience buffering or just use up a ton of your, mobile data or something.
Do you think the age of downloading a file or files and then putting on a device is gone?
I don't know if it's gone, but I think it's going to be. I think so.
Yeah, I think more people might, I think more people buy vinyl than have a digital file on their phone.
Probably,
you know? Because iTunes has gone away.
It's all Apple Music now.
Yeah. But there's still record stores.
Yeah.
Isn't that
true.
fucked up? That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
I mean, I still love, having a physical product in my hands. I love the artwork. I love everything about like vinyl records and just general, music merchandise.
Yeah.
So I would hate to see that go away.
But, I guess some issues that come with streaming and not having the album or song just ready to go is just like your service, your service, like especially taking the Long Island Railroad every day for me. It's like sometimes like Spotify will cut out, or it wouldn't load the song. Like the part, like I'm listening to a song the other day and 5 seconds of it play and then it stops. Mm-hmm. And I have a full signal, but it just stopped. Maybe because my phone is shitty, but that's another thing.
Well, that's the thing, I think, is, what's that? There's like a saying, it's like when the waters rise, like all the boats rise. You know what I mean? Basically, there's top tier phones that are probably able to go under the East River and not lose that signal. But I don't have one of those. But eventually, as those keep progressing, the what becomes the bottom tier phones is all going to raise up to the point where it is all just fast enough to make it work. I don't know when that'll be, if that'll even happen. That's my prediction.
Yeah. So from an engineering point of view, walk me through the process of mixing and mastering. Like what happens?
Mixing, or whoever's mixing will just take all of, like when you're recording multi-track, so you'll have a separate signal for a singer and a separate microphone for a drum, a separate microphone for a guitar. And then when you're mixing, you're going to blend those all together so they sound nice. And then when you master it, you basically take what you mix together and it's brought up to like industry standard levels. So when you're mixing, you're not sitting there trying to make it as loud as possible, because then you'll just distort everything. You just want the blend to sound good. And then when you the mastering engineer concerns themselves with kind of bringing it up to the industry level.
So a few things. What are you trying to blend together? All of the tracks, or from a sonic perspective to make things sound right from a frequency level?
Kind of both. You definitely concern. It's all tied together, because like as you're mixing things together, if you just go into it and start playing with the levels, different things will happen, whether you're like aware of it or not. It'll basically like, different frequencies from the different signals will start to interact with each other. So if, you have a vocal and it's in the same range as like a guitar, one of them is probably going to mask frequencies from the other. So you may have to like use an equalizer to change the characteristic of that sound in order to, to make it so you can hear the vocal and you can hear the guitar, and you make them both like clear, and you kind of then can creatively use these different, an equalizer deals with the frequencies, so you're very concerned with it during that time, but you're kind of trying to be artistic at the same time.
From mastering, what is industry level? What is an industry level of mastering?
That's a good question. It's not like something that could easily, like, I could give you numbers, but I think the average person that might be listening to this is not really that interested in that. But basically, you want to make it like kind of as loud as the other stuff that's out there. There's a kind of target that they try to hit. You don't want to over squash it and make it too loud. And you don't want it to be too quiet. And you want it to be, you're dealing with, the brightness of it, the punchiness of it. And if you put on your music and it's unmastered, and then you put on a mastered song from that you downloaded off Spotify or something, or off iTunes, you don't want to, you're going to hear the difference if it's unmastered. Once it's mastered, it's kind of like, it's just the same level, the kind of same, on the same level.
So it's loudness. It's level of loudness.
It's more than that, but that's a main part of it. I mean, someone that I work with said it really well. He said to try to make it like competitive, to make it competitive with what's out there. So it's like, it's, it could be your music could be as loud as the next thing in your genre, but theirs might have more punch in the bass, and yours maybe it may not require more punch in the bass, but if it should have that amount of punch in the bass and some listeners not hearing it, it's gonna register with them as like unprofessional, or like,
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I listen to different artists, like back to back, like I'll take an underground band from Long Island or Brooklyn or whatever, and then I'll put on like Tame Impala, for example.
You hear the difference.
You hear it. It's so sharp. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
What's going on here? But a lot of it is probably economic, because most people are not. Well, I guess a lot of musicians can't afford to have their music mastered like Kevin Parker is able to do, for example.
Yeah.
But I've heard underground groups that really mix their stuff very, very well. Like, some people pay attention to that stuff. And I think that makes for a successful artist, in my opinion, for the long haul. Stuff that, you know what I mean? Like, you care about your sound, whatever that is. You care about how people are going to listen to it. That's what I tell. Well, I don't really tell artists, but that's what I look for when I listen to music. It's, would you listen to this in the car? Would you share this with people? Would you play this in front of people? If you don't know the answer to that, maybe there's some work you have to do.
Yeah.
With your band, Semi Automatix, you're a punk band. So how do you stick out, or try to stick out from other punk bands? If that makes any sense.
Well, we have 3 guitars, and four of us sing. So we kind of, I guess, I kind of came to a point with it where I did ask myself that question a lot, and I came to a point of realization that what makes us us and what makes us stand out is just the combination of that group of people playing together. So it's like, if you hear our music, we have an EP out there now, Welcome to the Unknown, and we have a single out, and we have more on the way. But if you listen to any of that stuff, like, hopefully it will stand out to you. I don't know, like, we don't try to do too much, to do that. We just kind of be us and make the music we make. And I just try to do a really great, like, we recorded it at Continental, the EP, and the single for that matter, and I did the mixing, and then we sent it out for mastering, Talon Douches. And I mean, to me, I was just going to, like, I wanted it to sound like my favorite bands. So I wanted it to sound like on par with like Pennywise, or like the Bouncing Souls, or any of those, Rancid or something. I think we used the Interrupters as a reference too. So I wanted it to sound like on par with that. And I think that maybe, if I'm doing my job right, separates us from some of the more local bands, because it's just, I mean, there's a lot of great local bands out there, and there's a lot of great recordings out there. I found that out in the whole playlisting process of this all. I found bands where I found out they recorded at home, and I'm like, this sounds incredible. And I mean, it's just, what is there, like 30,000 songs released a week or something on Spotify? So it's like, how do you stand out from the white noise,
Yeah.
That question you asked is like such a, if you could figure that out, then you're in a good place.
Yeah, I think there's a way to not reinvent the wheel, but kind of stick out anyway.
Yeah.
There's a band that I listen to. They're from New York, Answering Machine.
Okay.
And when I'm listening to them, I'm like, okay, this is a punk band, like as you would know, but they have a level of melody and songwriting, and they're trying to put something together and not just kind of hit you with a streamline of, you know what I mean? Like a lot of classic punk records are just like, boom, right in your face.
Yeah.
Boom. Just 1, 2, 3, 45 seconds, in and out, you're done. And a lot of like Minor Threat are like the best at that, because they'll come at you 45 seconds straight edge, but you get what they're saying.
Yeah.
And they're trying to put together a song too. They have some melody. Like Ian MacKaye is always, we love melody. We love pop music. And, it's cool to see certain bands try to do that. And
Yeah.
a band like Place Space Strangers, former guests on the show, they have incredible. They sound incredible. It's unbelievable. Like I would play that back to back with like a big, a bigger band. Yeah. It just you just find your lane and try to be the best at what you're doing in that space.
Well, there's something you said in that I kind of feel like I'm on a personal mission to tap into, because you brought up like classic punk bands, and I feel like with the sound that we have, it's like I don't feel like there's a lot out there right now that really captures the spirit of that classic punk kind of sound. I mean, I'm sure there is in the underground. I don't want to like make like, some kind of sweeping generalization, but most punk bands, I mean, Rancid kind of sounds like an old school punk band. They have their sound down. They've had it down for years. Dropkick Murphys is a big influence on us, and I kind of feel like they did a lot to impact punk, but it kind of was also to keep that traditional sound alive. And I kind of feel like if you listen to a band like Pup, for example, they're great, but they kind of have a new sound. They don't sound like an old school punk band. So I think that's
great.
It is great, but I think that's one thing for us that maybe does make us stand out, is that we kind of are really trying to follow in the footsteps of like, the old school punk bands. A lot of our influences, like, there's modern ones, Rancid, Dropkick Murphys, but we're big into like the Clash, the Ramones, all the old stuff really. So we're kind of maybe trying to stand out by, like you said, like not reinventing the wheel, but like doing something fresh, but staying true to like our roots. Like when we get together, we pretty much just play, and that's what comes out.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wearing your influences on your sleeve, but you just can't put their whole shirt on.
Yeah,
you know
that's
what I mean?
a good. That's a great perspective.
You can have a patch on your jacket.
Sure, yeah.
You can have a Rancid patch on your jacket, or Pennywise. You can have a Offspring patch on your jacket, but don't don't jock their merch. You know what I'm saying? Don't take everything.
A great example is like Motorhead, because apparently
yeah.
Lemmy was a huge Ramones fan, and they were trying to sound like the Ramones. But if you listen to Motorhead, it doesn't sound anything like the Ramones. So
Nirvana and the Pixies.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Sonic Youth. Same thing.
Yeah, it sounds nothing like it. So it's like that's a big thing for us, is like we're trying to sound, like I said, like in the end, I'm trying to make something that like if it shows up next to a Bad Religion song in a playlist, someone's not like, oh, that sounds terrible. They're like, oh, it just sounds like as good as everything else you're listening to.
Yeah.
That's like the kind of price of entry right there. It's like that's your ticket to just like getting on the line now of being like judged by the general public, and I like it. I enjoy hearing feedback from people. If they like it, if they don't like it, it's, I enjoy it, because that's pretty much what we're setting out to do in the end, is just make music and, make records and have fun with it.
You're not trying to make any critics happy. You're just
Yeah.
making music for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's perks to critics being happy, but yeah, you can't think about that when you're making the music.
Yeah.
And self-censorship.
You're walking a line that's very hard to kind of stay on, because you can either go on, okay, this band is just a ripoff of this band, or you're just, again, like we were saying, you're just inspired by this group. And I feel like a band like, I've been listening to this new group called Dummy, and it's made up of members of Wild Honey, and they're very inspired by Stereolab. And then when I'm listening to this, I'm like, okay, I hear Stereolab, but you're not ripping off Letitia Sadier. You're not. You obviously loved Pang, and you're just kind of playing it out. And I think with a band like yours, I think there's a space to do that with not just blatantly ripping off any group.
Yeah.
So, got the punk. We have the studio. The one thing I've always been, conflicted about from an engineering standpoint is limiting and compression. And I know it's probably very hard to kind of define. So can you give your best, definition of what limiting and compression do?
Well, limiting. Okay, a compressor basically you'll put it on your sound, your signal, your source, and you have these things called ratios. So you'll see on a compressor, there's usually a setting 4-1, 2-1. So what that means is that once the signal crosses a certain threshold, it will take it like 4 decibels. The compressor will squash it down. So it takes 4 decibels for it to sound like it's going, 1 decibel over. So it'll kind of cut any decibel down by a quarter. So if it goes a decibel over the threshold, the compressor will squish it down to a quarter decibel, if that makes sense. It basically tames the dynamics of the signal. It makes it like the louder parts quieter, and then the makeup gain will make the quieter parts louder. So if you have a singer and they're singing and you can't hear some words, but then some words are way too loud, what you do is you put a compressor on it, and it'll kind of make the quieter words a little louder and make the louder words a little quieter. And you use the various controls to make that happen. So a limiter is basically a compressor with a very high ratio. So you'll set a ceiling, and then it won't go over that, basically. So it's like an infinity to 1 instead of 4-1. So if the thing goes up 50 decibels above the threshold, it's going to squash it down to that ceiling.
Does it prevents distortion?
It could create distortion, actually.
Oh, okay.
It prevents distortion by clipping. That's what a
Okay.
limiter does. So if you put it on the end of your whole chain, that's usually kind of at the end of a mastering chain, it'll keep it from digitally clipping. But if you kind of don't do it right, you could distort the actual, the signal that's coming in. You could cause pumping, or, if a big bass hits and you have a limiter on it really squashing it, it'll turn down the rest of the track when the bass hits.
So what's some advice that you would have for an inspiring musician that may want to record with you, or someone that wants to start engineering or start their own studio?
If someone wants to record with me, just reach out. I'm always taking projects. I guess we'll be getting to my info at the end of the whole thing. Reach out. I'm definitely accessible, and like I said, taking on new projects all the time. If someone's looking to get into engineering, just be ready for a tough road. It's not an easy career to pursue. If you're doing it to work on your own projects, by all means, explore it. I fell in love with it. It's a great art. It's a lot of fun. So definitely, learn as much as you can and make the most of it. And to anyone who wants to start a studio, get ready for that. That is quite the ride. It's a very tough career, and studio is really hard to do because it takes a lot. And we did it really with in the beginning with no money, not like you see these studios, nowadays, or just on a higher level. It's you could dump. They say how do you make $1 million in a recording studio? you invest $2 million. So that right there, I think is just kind of be smart about it and seek out investment. Maybe, I don't know.
What are some obstacles that you went through that you overcame in this career that you've chosen?
Well, I mean, just making your name is really like a very big obstacle right off the bat. And, you got to deal with long hours in the beginning, especially, and not making much money. People do not want to pay you a lot of money, especially when you first start out. So, just living a lot of years with no money and, like kind of struggling was pretty difficult. But I mean, it kind of all paid off because I got to do what I love to do. And, I kind of knew there'd be a light at the end of the tunnel. And now that I moved here, I'm actually starting to see that light. So it's, there's still obstacles always, though. That's one thing I'll say. They're never going to go away.
All righty. Mike, thanks for coming on My Little Underground, Level 44, celebrating 2 years. Appreciate everything that you've done for this
2
podcast.
years.
So where can people reach out to you to book a session or what have you? Floor is yours.
Find me on Instagram. I'm at Mike Gevasa. And then our band is at Semi Automatix_. So yeah, if you want to reach out, you can reach out through those avenues. All my contact info is up there. So that's probably the easiest way to get it out there. Yeah, and we're playing a show February 16th. So
Where?
come see us. St. Vitus.
Oh, I love St. Vitus.
Me too. I can't wait to play there.
Level 44, My Little Underground. I'm Peter A. Don't forget to subscribe to My Little Underground anywhere you get podcasts. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at MLU Pod, and YouTube as well. Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter. It's Peter_A. Level 44, My Little Underground. I'm out.